concerning cash and voucher assistance and human mobility. I'm Álvaro Frias at the IECA, and today I will be the organizer this morning and in the Americas or wherever you find yourselves around the world. But let me remind you that before starting, we shall be testing, we shall be doing this, or rather, you can switch off your camera or not. Okay, let's begin inaugurating this event. As you all know, this is co-organized by the IECA, the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation for Development and Rental. Cristina will be addressing the floor from the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation and Development. She will be organizer. Well, good morning from Spain, and good morning to all of you that are connecting from other regions in Latin America specifically. As always, it's a pleasure to be here for the inauguration of this specialization workshop. We believe that we have been remembering, and this is the third workshop concerning the theme on cash and voucher assistance. And this is focused on mobility and human mobility. We are collaborating with the IECA and the CALP network here from the Humanitarian Action Office of the ACID, the Spanish agency concerning the turning point concerning monetary transfers, concerning cash and voucher assistance, was produced especially after the Istanbul Humanitarian Summit and the minutes achieved at Bahrain. And now in 2023, at present, we find ourselves 6 years later after that moment. So I believe that a clear conclusion that we can affirm without making a mistake is the evidence that the use of cash programs has been one of great importance, that we have advanced much. Nevertheless, with regards to everything else, the challenges that we face concerning the different humanitarian contexts pushes us to improve and to revise how this aid modality takes place every time we see more complex circumstances. And in this case, the large and diverse human mobility flows urgently need the design of solutions focused in transforming this system, this way of working towards the greater benefit of those individuals that are beneficiaries of these programs. Of course, solutions like, for example, incentivize the increase of stakeholders in the financial systems throughout the migratory routes, or for monitoring to take place more often through digital solutions, the search of more innovative solutions, creative ones, for the identification of people. And of course, to take into account when we design these programs of the possible government restrictions for the provision of cash and voucher assistance programs, and how to overcome the hurdles that the standards at a regional level might be faced, and of course to take into account the period of time of those needs of those people that are in need, when a movement on behalf of ACID, the Spanish agency, we've been working for a period of time concerning this modality of monetary transfers. And of course, we've followed a path that, of course, can be seen with regards to the funds. Back in 2019, amongst the funds dedicated to our programs towards cash and vouchers, well, we were talking of more or less a 2.7 million euros. This was back in 2019. Nevertheless, in 2022, at present, this amount reaches 7.7 million euros. In other words, there has been growth concerning the usage of this modality within all the contexts in which we work, in Latin America, the Caribbean, of course, but also in the humanitarian and priority context as a whole that we handle here in this Spanish Agency for International Cooperation. And because we are fully aware of the advantages concerning these monetary transfers to be able to respond to humanitarian crises, since then, we have made certain decisions that have to do with strategic matters and operational matters, which allow us to integrate further these assistance modalities in those contexts in which we work. And of course, with a preference towards those individuals which are in these migratory paths that in another manner, it would be very difficult for them to obtain means for survival purposes. Now, with regards to the destined funds beyond these global figures, and to address now fully those interventions concerning people, protection of people in mobility, we have destined since 2021 a total of 7.2 million euros to these projects. In other words, interventions addressed to those individuals which have been displaced. And out of those 7.2 million euros that take care of needs at a global level of all sorts, 1.7 million euros have been addressed to what are these cash and voucher assistance programs. Hence, this is a large percentage of that amount of funds. Back in 2022, the amount has grown. The global amount dedicated to interventions that have to do with the protection of displaced people. The total amount has gone from 7.2 to 11 million euros. And within those 11 million euros, 2.2 are addressed to cash. In these two cases, they talk about cash only and not voucher assistance. Hence, we are increasing these aid modalities. And besides the funds, what other matters can we promote from ACID? Well, it's also important to train and thereafter to try and promote workshops like this one. We do understand that it's clear to promote capabilities in monetary transfers amongst the humanitarian actors, and therefore this is why the support and efforts to carry out initiatives of this nature. Now, the objective of this workshop where we find ourselves is the common efforts of experiences and case studies concerning different humanitarian model programs addressed to migrant populations. And what do we expect? We expect this workshop to allow us to share information concerning the progress concerning monetary transfers through all the information that the implementing partners can carry out with our Spanish agency, and also an overview concerning these monetary transfers at present with regards to mobility individuals, listening to all of us, and of course to reflect from a practical perspective concerning aspects such as monetary links with social protection matters of the migrant population, or to try the important challenge concerning coordination on the subject matter, and of course the relevance of integrating the perspective of diversity in the program of monetary transfers. Hence, with no further ado, let me push you all to participate actively, to take advantage of these 2 days and for the workshop to be very fruitful. And of course, I wish to end, first of all, to thanking our partners and the travel company agencies like IECA, the Institute of Studies on Conflicts and Humanitarian Action, IECA from now on, and all the other individuals. Thank you kindly for my part, and success to all of you. Well, thank you, Cristina, for your words and for all the items you've mentioned concerning the implementation of these monetary transfer programs from the ACID and the promotion that is taking place in the future concerning these different modalities. With no further ado, I wish to be very short and to add a few words. First of all, it's a pleasure for us to be able to convey continuity, as Cristina was saying. Continuity concerning the subject matter. We began, with this third workshop, and we're changing things. Last year, we dealt with gender, and this year we are focusing on human mobility. And also to say that in 2019, we carried out a first study, not to see how this was implemented, how it was implemented in some of the NGOs with regards to our ACID. Concerning this monetary transfer program is something that has been around for many years. And although it generated a discussion at the start, it's true that this is a modality that is here to stay. And since 2015, from a 7.9% to a 19% in 2021, it was increased. And lastly, we wish to thank ACID. We have been collaborating with it for years concerning these activities as workshops with the objective of outreach purposes to share the best experiences and also to thank the CALP network. We are members since a short period of time, but it's always a privilege to be able to have their support because this has allowed us to learn much concerning this modality, concerning monetary transfers, as well as to be able to disseminate it and to compare the different concerns from a humanitarian perspective. With no further ado, Holly, the regional representative of the CALP network, she will be moderating the next session, which has to do with the transfer monetary programs concerning human mobility. Well, thank you, Alvaro. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those of you that are present at this meeting. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We have an excellent panel with experiences from different locations. Let me talk with you, let me converse with you. Alvaro and Cristina have addressed the systems, but to talk about the what we're talking about through ACNUR, 100 million people were obliged to be displaced. And we're talking of a growth since 2020. We're talking of 80,000 individuals at present, and it's almost double the amount of the previous decade. Hence, this trend is worsening. And the effects, of course, concerning climate change are displacing and threatening almost 200 million people towards the year 2050. Thus, this matter is very important for the world. When we talk of the largest humanitarian crises, they're definitely branded by human mobility. I've spoken about the growth of the use of monetary transfers, and it is true that they're being used more often. And these programs represent 20% of all the humanitarian aid. And if we're thinking since 2015, it's grown at 205%, hence it's significant. It is therefore logic to see a growth and the evolution of the usage of these monetary transfer programs within human mobility context. At CALP, since last year, we began exploring in depth this topic concerning programs, human mobility, cash and voucher assistance, and we've complemented a study concerning this theme. Surely you know about this study. It's available in English and Spanish, and there's an executive summary which is available in French, and we can share it with you thereafter. We have focused on the Americas, and this is an opportunity at present to think further of our contexts. On our behalf, we wish to promote, share, and learn concerning this topic, and this event is an example of this. Hence, we can share all the information through our webpage, but of course, we invite the speakers or the panelists to do so as well. For the preparation of this panel, it's important to say that not all the agencies use the term of human mobility. Others use migrants, displaced, or interested parties, and not everyone use the same term. It's important to understand it, therefore. And each agency has its own obligations. Who will they serve? And each context has its opportunities and challenges. Therefore, keeping this in mind, we have brought together a great panel which wishes to address the different perspectives of their agencies and the expected results concerning these monetary transfer programs in the different geographies. We have 5 speakers that represent regional and national perspectives and at an answer level. And each speaker will only have 7 minutes. I know it's a short time, but thereafter, we will have space for the Q&A. And on the chat, you can write down your questions. And thereafter, we will be responding as soon as we can. Hence, my dear panel members, I know it's very difficult to be able to speak for 7 minutes, but let's try and do so. I'm going to switch my camera off when you start addressing the floor. And when I switch it on, you will have 1 last minute to address the floor. Let me, first of all, invite the first panelist, Israel Mosso. He's the leader of humanitarian at Save the Children Mexico. He will be talking about the experience about the humanitarian transfer programs concerning health results with populations in movement in the northern part of Mexico. Israel, please switch on your camera and share your words with us. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Israel Mosso. I will talk about the experience we had in the northern border of Mexico. We implemented a project together with the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation and Development. We implemented Cash Salud, but it was part of a program that had other components, psycho-emotional components, movement components, and with this health cash aid, we provided medical assistance, also the purchase of medication, clinical analysis, and transportation. And this project was implemented in a context, this after 2018, with the migratory crisis that came about with the first caravan with mobility families from Central America. And another context that was added was the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic. When this came about, the situation was more complex for these families because in the United States, they apply Standard 42 that wanted to remove these individuals or families because they spoke about public health issues. So what we were able to implement in Tijuana was this cash on health. We implemented cash transfers and coupons as well. And 6 of these shelters adopted cash transfers, while 1 shelter adopted this issue of the vouchers. Now, these 6 shelters that adopted the cash transfers, we assigned to them a debit card. Hence, we were able to carry out often transfers, while the shelter spent this money with those families that approached the shelter, especially the Cash Salud or health was focused to children, boys, girls, teenagers, fathers, mothers, and they had easy access to this cash assistance. So what we requested from these 6 shelters is for them to be attentive to the needs of these families. And obviously, every time that they spent those transfers, we carried out a further transfer so as to be able to continue helping these families. So what we asked the shelters, first of all, to be very much aware of their needs and to be able to prove the expenses in a justified manner. The single shelter that adopted the voucher system was not responsible to the cash transfers because of a lack of staff. And many of these shelters are not state shelters, but rather these are conditioned churches to be able to shelter families in mobility. Therefore, the shelter only has a director and one or two individuals for support. So the shelter in which we provided these vouchers, we supported them, providing them with a health provider. We organized things so for this person to accept vouchers. And every week we visited the shelter to be able to provide these coupons that were delivered by this health provider to be able to provide with these services that these families requested to the people in charge of the shelters or the director. And one of the things that we started doing with Cash Salud or health was first level care. Nevertheless, it was a live project, the Cash project, because they were able to take into account or handle it, especially women, as this assistance moved ahead, they requested further care. So what we were able to convey were gynecological care because of gender matters, but also psycho-emotional assistance for girls, boys, teenagers, and adults. This need existed because families requested this attention because of what had taken place when leaving their countries, but also because of their transit through Mexico, because they had to face different circumstances. Hence, we were able to increase this health fund. And we implemented also a monitoring system for the Cash Health system. These were two printed formats delivered into each one of the shelters. A format referred to how to request this health fund. And the second form was the level of satisfaction concerning the health service provided. If a shelter or a family needed to use this health fund, well, they had to address the shelters to be able to request this fund. And the data provided was, I'm not feeling well, I suffer from respiratory issues or tummy issues. So they jotted down in the first form why they needed to access this health fund. After the care provided, which might be a medical consultation, medications, or transportation in the doctor's office or returning back to the shelter, another form had to be filled out. So we were able to know the level of satisfaction of these people having had access to these health services. The Save the Children in the field was very much aware of how this request of the health fund took place, but also the satisfaction fund. And we ended with this, or we finished with this health fund in Tijuana. And at present, we're applying another one at Ciudad Juarez and at 7 shelters. So when we finished with the project in Tijuana, we were able to create what we call lessons learned. And we are implementing them in Ciudad Juarez. The very important one is the following.
In order to just look after the fund needs, the follow-up needs to be extremely punctual. And we need to provide workshops to children, teenagers, and also in regard to the fund. So it is better to provide a case worker in order to give a better service in Ciudad Juarez. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. And in order to also get the experience of people who have been in a human mobility context and their needs, although health is not a topic we hear about frequently, this is key for people in mobility. Now let's switch from Mexico to Africa. And we have two speakers. I will invite Insa Musabasi, Regional Coordinator for Migration and Displacement in Africa at the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies, and also Makan Boubacar Sisao, who is the migration focal point of Malian Red Cross of the Mali Red Cross Society. INSA will share with us the strategic focus of the Federation on Migration, and Makan will share the experience in this topic with people internally displaced. INSA and Makan, please open your cameras and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Holly. It's a pleasure for us to be here today. And as my intervention, I want to highlight some key points, and we'll give the floor to Makan to proceed. So the IFRC, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Agenda for Renewal and Strategy 2030, more effectively position the IFRC Secretariat for global coordination and leadership to ensure the IFRC network address 5 global challenges, which should include migration and identity, and other 7 areas for transformation. The migration and identity challenge seeks to ensure that all people who migrate and are displaced are safe, are treated humanly and with dignity, and have the support they need to thrive in inclusive societies. And this will include expanding humanitarian support provided to migrants along their routes to ensure their needs are addressed through essential services and protection, irrespective of their legal status, or both emergency and non-emergency context. The IFRC plan and budget 2021 and 2025 also highlights the importance of global cash leadership for the IFRC and its national societies, and it includes a target of 50% of all humanitarian assistance to be provided using cash and or voucher by 2025. In supporting communities and local communities in this way, the IFRC seeks to improve its accountability, effectiveness, and efficiency in reaching the most vulnerable. Considering the scaling up of its assistance through these modalities, the IFRC is seeking to explore the barriers to and the opportunities to the use of cash and voucher assistance in humanitarian response to migration. As an example of the potential scale of opportunities, the Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies, with the support of the IFRC, are increasingly using CVA in humanitarian response to migration in emergency context, but also for longer term program. We have some example within the region, the Africa region. We have national societies like Chad, Niger, Gambia, Cameroon, Kenya, Mali that use this cash modality for us emergency response tool and longer term program. So I will stop there and give the floor to my colleague Makan Sisao from the Mali Red Cross that will provide more details on the experience of the Mali Red Cross using cash in humanitarian response to migration. Makan, please, can you open your camera?
Bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous me voyez? Donc, je suis Makan Boubacar Sisao. Je suis le point focal migration et la Croix-Rouge malienne. Et voilà, compte tenu du temps, je vais aller un peu plus rapidement. La Croix-Rouge malienne a une grande expérience dans le cadre du transfert monétaire en lien avec les populations en mouvement, mais beaucoup plus dans le domaine des populations, des personnes déplacées internes. En termes de rappel, le Mali est un pays situé en Afrique de l'Ouest, en Afrique de l'Ouest. Et pour ceux qui ne le savent pas, le Mali est en proie à une situation de crise humanitaire causée par une crise sécuritaire et puis une crise politique. depuis 2012, il y a les conflits intercommunautaires, les conflits vraiment entre groupes armés et les conflits en lien avec le terrorisme, avec les djihadistes. Donc, tout cela couplé fait que le Mali, les migrants qui passent par le Mali sont dans une situation de vulnérabilité extrême. Parce que aussi, il faut rappeler que le Mali est en même temps un pays de départ, un pays de transit et même un pays d'accueil. Et dans l'assistance en faveur de ces migrants vulnérables, nous avons été impliqués à des programmes qui ont utilisé les cash et plus précisément les vouchers. Mais avant de parler de ces programmes, je voudrais rappeler que l'expérience du Mali en lien avec les populations déplacées dues au conflit, le Mali utilise une méthodologie vraiment de transfert, cash transfert à travers les transferts non restrictifs, les transferts restrictifs et les transferts inconditionnels, les transferts conditionnels et les transferts monétaires à usage multiple. Et généralement, on fait ces opérations à travers la téléphonie mobile ou à travers des prestataires de services financiers. Comme je l'ai dit, nos cibles, c'est les IDPs, hein, les personnes victimes de catastrophes et puis aussi des changements climatiques et aussi des migrants en détresse. Et j'avoue que les 3 dernières années, entre les 3 dernières années et maintenant, le Mali a apporté une assistance à plus de 20 000 personnes à travers les cash transferts. Donc, maintenant, les défis auxquels on est confronté, c'est vraiment des défis de renforcement de capacité de nos différentes branches en matière de transferts monétaires. Et aussi, le renforcement continu des capacités sur le plan du CEA, du PGI, et aussi vraiment une intégration des transferts monétaires dans ces domaines. Et aussi, voilà, ça, c'est les défis auxquels on est confronté. Maintenant, j'avais tantôt parlé du projet, dans le cadre, spécifiquement pour ce qui concerne la migration, le projet dans lequel nous avons été impliqués, c'est le projet EUTF qui vient de prendre fin. Ce projet était mis en œuvre par la Croix-Rouge malienne en collaboration avec d'autres intervenants externes au mouvement. Donc, il y avait un volet d'assistance par endroit et la Croix-Rouge malienne s'occupait voilà, du volet RLF, du volet distribution des kits d'hygiène et puis des volets psychosociaux. Maintenant, on était en consortium avec une autre organisation qu'on appelle CRS. CRS s'occupait du volet assistance alimentaire. Et dans le cadre de l'assistance alimentaire, CRS utilisait les vouchers pour que les migrants puissent vraiment avoir à manger. Et là, on contractait avec les opérateurs économiques de la place, les commerçants, et les migrants qui venaient vraiment prendre ces vouchers pouvaient aller s'approvisionner chez ces commerçants en nourriture. Et voilà. Maintenant, les risques qu'on a vraiment, les défis qu'on a constatés à ce niveau, c'est vraiment les risques en lien avec la sécurité même du migrant, parce que le fait que ces vouchers-là, OK, et les risques liés à la sécurité, parce que ces vouchers-là étaient carrément pris tout juste après être donnés aux migrants. Les passeurs les ramassaient avec ces migrants-là, parce que ces migrants-là voyageaient sous le contrôle de ces passeurs. Il y a les risques liés à ce que aussi les migrants puissent utiliser ces vouchers pour acheter des stupéfiants, notamment de l'alcool, de la drogue, des cigarettes et choses, etc., etc. Donc, vraiment, si ici, on doit intégrer ce programme transfert monétaire dans le cadre de la migration, il va falloir vraiment approfondir les analyses des risques qui sont liés au phénomène. Et je vous remercie.
Merci.
All these phenomena We have to go really in depth into this. Thank you, Makan. Very well. From Mali, let's go now to Europe. I will now invite Francisco Astudillo Poggi, who is a CBI officer at the International Organization for Migration, the IOM. And Francisco will focus on the countries at a country level, and we'll talk about his experience in regard to monetary transfers in the context of human mobility, with interesting examples from Ukraine and Djibouti, not only Europe, but he will, Thailand also, so he will talk about, he will make his presentation. Open your camera and let's start, and also the Philippines. Thank you, everyone. My name is Francisco Astudillo, and Holly well said it. I work at the cash-based interventions and cash and voucher assistance department. And thank you to CALP for this interesting initiative that gives us an opportunity to have a dialogue and a conversation. I would like to talk about the IOM, its perspective, and their cash and voucher assistance in human mobility contexts. The topic and the mandate of the IOM in regard to migration is important. We assist people with different vulnerability and mobility characteristics, including refugees, people internally displaced, people requesting shelter, people in reception country. So the mandate is quite large. And since the IOM has become a cash and voucher main actor, we are trying to see how we can harmonize the worldwide experiences inside the IOM, and to make the most of these experiences and be able to systematize the cash transfer programs and cash assistance programs. Now, I would like to highlight at a global and strategic level, we have a strategic goal in regard to the cash transfer programs included in the IOM since 2022 to the year 2026. And we have a strategic goal. And here, the very important thing is that we can reduce the vulnerabilities of these people, focusing mostly on the different contexts of mobility and vulnerability that cannot always be treated in a general manner, in a generalized manner. And we have to really incorporate these issues in every possible work area. And something that's very important, these strategies intend to increase the flexibility of the money transfers in order to be able to look after different types of vulnerabilities and different migration types in order to have a safe delivery and protect these individuals. And obviously, seeking a sustainable solutions. And this is the ultimate line of work we would like to delve into, to connect people, to tie people to development assistance, to different programs, social protection programs, depending on the context. And after this preamble, 3 examples of our learning curve at the IOM. The first, experience from Thailand during the pandemic. We had many economic migrants from Myanmar. They lost their job during the pandemic. And although they were not candidates of the IOM for humanitarian assistance, the focus was placed on their needs, on their urgent needs, so that they could cover their necessities, avoid displacement, and this became a preventive measure in order to not recur to negative subsistence mechanisms. And now in the case of Ukraine, we have cases of mobility because of an armed conflict. And we can see that there's an advantage of offering us robust financial systems and a provider who worked with MasterCard, and then we were able to find a solution. And for prepaid cards, we had prepaid cards for people in transit. I'm sorry. So I was saying that in the Ukraine, because of the armed conflict, there was mobility, and we were able to assist people in transit going to Estonia and Lithuania. And we assisted people with a MasterCard prepaid card that could be used inside the country, but also in the European Economic Zone. So the person, if her final destination was Finland, they could go through Estonia, receive the assistance, and in turn, this assistance could be used in any other country of the European Union. So this was part of a systematization mode on how to adapt this to people. And lastly, the case of Djibouti, and not extend myself. Because of the displacements and because of the climate change, we came up with a project where we assisted people. We had a conditional CBI to pick up plastic bottles and collect them. So we would give money transfers to these people based on the amount of collected plastic bottles. So we had beneficiaries from the displaced communities and the reception community. And we realized that they had great needs, and we came up with a synergy. Now, my time's up. So I give the floor to Holly again. Thank you for your attention. Francisco, very interesting to look at the scope of the different possibilities of cash transfers and how the IOM works in different cases. Now, last speakers will focus in the Americas, and it's my pleasure to present Diego Prado. I work with him daily. He is the Deputy Regional Representative for the CALP network working in the Americas. Diego will share perspectives on human mobility in the Americas, and again, some conceptual and practical efforts to address people on the move and their needs. So Diego, turn on your camera, please. Thank you, Holly. Good day, good evening to everyone, to all the participants. It's interesting to be the last one after having listened to every single one of you, the phenomenon of human mobility is nothing new in history. We have considered it a transit carried out by people for different reasons. And as Francisco said, we need to bear in mind the fact that every motivation is different and quite distinct. Human mobility has a certain negative tinge, and we always perceive it as something related to needs, dire needs, but this never tells the entire film. And in regard to what we can do, we have different motivations, therefore we have different people on the move. I mean by that human mobility should be seen as a capital. And we have insisted as at CAT Network on this fact, and we have heard about cases in different regions of the world where the attention is differentiated as well as the programs people receive, because we find differentiated needs. Israel spoke about a particular case in regard to health assistance programs, which is quite useful and beneficial depending on the zone we're working in, the central zones and in North America. Now, I mean to say that some will have a more capacity to move than others because of physical capacities, material capacities, or the ecosystems. And in the Americas, we have totally different ecosystems, different reasons and motivations. And what we can do from the stance of our different experiences in the Americas. And of course, the assistance for people on the move, these programs need to be delivered based on the knowledge of the ecosystem where we live. We do not have a master key or a magic wand, but we need to identify the fact that a route from Honduras to Guatemala to Mexico can pose different risks from what we have seen in routes from Venezuela to Colombia or from Colombia to Panama, which are the best known routes in this migrant phenomenon, because Darien clog between Colombia and Panama. So the notion, the definition of a migrant has to be interpreted in different ways. So it's a blend between the theory we have put forth and the practice and what we have learned in our exercise and knowing what happens in the Americas. And we have realized that mobility doesn't trigger vulnerability necessarily. It's more than that. It's a context where we gravitate and how vulnerability will deepen if there are risks along the route or there are negative practices inside the communities. So these reception points or the frictions between people, because of the fact that they're sharing with other people, with other human beings, and this can lead to situations that are not necessarily defined by mobility, but by the fact that I'm interacting with other people, and we need to bear that in mind. There are other types of phenomena that can be harmful, such as xenophobia, discrimination, the color of the skin, or my different language, or that is now leading to quarrels and problems in my final destination. So human mobility now poses a challenge to humanitarian assistance. So every intervention has to be innovative in order to really tend to people and tend to their needs. And now when we see a transit from Colombia to Ecuador or from Colombia to Peru, which is also totally different type of transit, or an interesting transit that is interesting inside Venezuela, where the different markets can respond to the needs of people. And we need to analyze our humanitarian context to provide effective assistance with the cash voucher and monetary transfer programs. So here are some ideas and some recommendations when we work on human mobility from the stance of what we have realized and have learned in the Americas. First, we need to identify the demographic profiles of the people and everything. There are many differences. The main reasons why people are on the move, why are they leaving certain areas, to understand the main trends and the intentions of their displacement, to know the reasons, the motivations, why are they going to Panama, Ecuador, Peru, the USA, Mexico, and lastly, to identify the main vulnerability triggers, mostly to know the context and to have an analysis well beyond what we have as a magic formula in the humanitarian context. So to analyze the expectations and needs of the populations and from our own organizations, how can we intervene in an assertive manner that can be efficient and beneficial for the people. So Holly, these are some ideas I wanted to pitch in, and these are the experiences and the learning curves in Colombia. Thank you. Well, right on time. Congratulations. And well, I'm sorry I cannot write in French. I apologize, but I'm inviting people to write their questions. So we still have some 15 minutes for questions and answers. So Sanedan Audek, who's asking? For everyone, anyone can ask. How is it that in your different contexts, how can you work? How do you work with the government or state actors to guarantee that the transfer programs are not considered a migration trigger, that are not forcing people to migrate? And so if you want to open your microphone.
Can I jump in and try to provide Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. And I think in a Red Cross perspective, we used to receive this kind of questions. And what make the Red Cross movement unique in the world is his auxiliary role towards governments. So we have developed a lot of advocacy and awareness raising in our actions. So for us also, it's key to work as auxiliary role as an NGO or international organization that is here to fill the gap or try to find solutions where there is a gap. So governments understand our mission and our role, and we keep advocating also in our programs. So people knows, governments knows our mandate that allow us also in respect on our 7 principles to develop our activities without being targeted or being saying that we are favoring migration or not. So the 7 principles of the Red Cross also are well known around the world in governments, and so the principle of impartiality and neutrality also are well known. So yeah, I think I will stop there, and yeah, I think that I have give some clarification. Thank you.
Another question, you can answer this question or another one. There's a question from Marta Nunez that is asking, Macan, go ahead. The question is the following: why to use the vouchers in populations that are in movement or in transit in our country, in Mali? we have used these vouchers. That's a very unsafe region with much conflict. And to give cash, it might mean to put in danger the lives of those individuals. Hence, this might create issues concerning the transportation of these people. These are little accessible regions. And so therefore we use the vouchers. And this allows us to provide aid. And this is the reason why we use these vouchers more than cash for that aid in our region. Israel is addressing a question to you. Why did you decide to utilize the coupons or vouchers with the migrants in Mexico? Might you answer, please? We coordinated things with the public health sector because during the pandemic, only hospitals were taking care of people with COVID symptoms or that were contagious. Hence, what we did was to provide this help to the shelters for these people to have access to the health services. The public health sector, and this is important, sometimes they visited the shelters to provide medical care, but they did not provide the drugs or medications or clinical analysis. So this component of cash health was a complementary matter. So yes, this proper coordination was good because we complemented this aid, and these families in mobility had access fully to these health services. This is what we did. We have different questions, so I'm going to read some of these questions and then see if somebody wishes to address them or answer them. Now, let's go back to the question of our colleague Marta. She asks, how do you work with groups in mobility when they do not have a permit to transit or to live in those countries? You know, we have to take into account the regulations in each country. So this is a very important question. And there is another question: what is the access, the real access, and the efficiency concerning access to financial systems for individuals in transit? It has to do with this question, with irregular migratory status and efficiency of the financial system and access to them. Israel, there you are. Do you have an answer? Maybe you do have an answer. In our case, with regards to having access, we were somewhat lucky in Tijuana. In Tijuana, we have what we call health tourism. People from the US visit Tijuana because they have access to cheaper health services. Health insurance are applied in Tijuana and certain border towns of Mexico. So there's much supply concerning health services. And much of these services hold these terminals, in other words, where you can have access to these services when we're talking of cash transfer. So it was easy to be able to use a Visa card that was delivered to each one of the shelters. Something else done is that the card is used through an application. So we were able to monitor how much they were spending, if they were spending in medication or doctor's visits. And something that we saw concerning mobility in the shelters, we had to implement every week or every period of time the promotion of this health fund, because families move between borders and shelters. Therefore, we saw the information that, for example, in Ciudad Juarez, they're crossing quicker, or shelters are being provided in the US. So people move from one side of the border to another, or people that come from Central America to the borders, they're new to this situation. So what we did concerning the promotion of cash health was not only information provided, but also audios for people to be able to understand and listen to what was happening. Many were illiterate. illiterate. Hence, it was always very important to inform and advertise this health fund. And that was a good result. Diego, do you wish to answer? You've switched on your camera. Yes, let me answer. Concerning experiences with people in movement, where the majority of these people, we're talking over 90%, have an irregular migratory situation. And what these agencies have done is to analyze the route and not, the specific assistance to the people. Hence, they anticipate and they mitigate the risk of taking care of people that enter the country without a permit. And, for these people to be able to have some sort of ID, to be able to request at different points of the route the services or goods that they wish to purchase. So what these agencies did was to identify routes of high migratory flow, where they were able to identify different markets, especially regarding food, shelter, transportation, and of course, they directly negotiated. In other words, these organizations organized things with these enterprises, and through an agreement, they were able to, a system or a platform specifically, well, these people were given a card where they were able to exchange the value of money that they were given at the start of the route. Hence, they mitigated somewhat this irregular situation, and for these to have access to goods and services and to be able to have these services in these routes. And answering to your second question, we cannot hear her any longer. No sound. They're back. Okay, Francisco, Isan, Francisco, there's a specific question addressed to you concerning this program where, they had an agreement with MasterCard. Would you like to answer this? And also other questions, and then Insa will have the floor. Allow me to say or answer Marta's question and to underscore the challenge concerning people in mobility and with an irregular situation when in those countries. At the OEM, sorry, no sound. It comes and go, excuse me. We do have certain experience helping out these people with the cash and voucher assistance program, but the region is complicated. And when I was talking about the experience concerning Ukraine, the big difference is with the people that are entering EU countries. Yes, of course, they do enter these countries in a regular manner, properly, in other words, but many of them have bank accounts in Ukraine, and they were able to use their accounts in other countries. For others and those that have had a MasterCard, they have all the documentation that the provider has requested. And this is another issue sometimes. And honestly, with regards to real access to financial systems, well, there's no access really. And with regards to delivering large amounts of cash in these migratory routes, it's quite risky and dangerous for the staff that work at these humanitarian agencies. This is not something that, in spite of the fact that there is no answer or response, it doesn't mean that we're not going to work towards this objective in the future. And also, I believe I've answered. No, I haven't answered the question concerning MasterCard. This is an agreement with a fintech, not with MasterCard. This fintech has an agreement with MasterCard. So what we did was we issue MasterCard cards, and these cards can be used in the different sales points. Thus, at the sales point, the people, sound comes and goes. We're having issues. Why don't you switch off your camera and then address the floor? In ATMs, they can withdraw money from ATMs. Yes, maybe switch off your camera. In conclusion, concerning MasterCard, people have the option of purchasing online or withdraw money from the ATMs and to carry out payments. It's a regional agreement that was applied only to the EU, but of course, it's because the financial system of the EU is open to that. In Latin America, I believe it's definitely more complex to be able to reach an agreement of this nature. But there are remittance agents that might be used in this case, but also we always have to talk about the ID of these people. So these are challenges, definitely, in our region. Thank you. Insa, do you wish to answer one of the questions?
Yes, I used to answer one of the questions and I will do it in French. I'm more comfortable in French. Great.
Si.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Donc, ce que je
Thank you
voulais
so
dire
much for the question. What I wish to say
à travers cette question sur l'utilisation du cash
regarding that
avec les
question
populations en mouvement qui peuvent être aussi irréguliers selon leur situation.
on
Je pense que là,
cash
c'est
or
une des difficultés majeures que
other.
le mouvement international de la
I
Croix-Rouge et
believe
du
that
Croissant-Rouge rencontre dans ces
this
opérations,
is
dans ces
one of the
activités de cash
challenges
programme.
at the Red
Parce que
Cross
la majeure
and the
partie des
Red
gens qui sont
Crescent.
en mobilité sont souvent
There
des personnes
are
qui n'ont
people
aucune
that
pièce d'identité et
move
des fois aussi
regions,
qui
and
ne
these are
veulent
people
pas
that don't even have
être
an ID
identifiés.
card,
Donc, c'est déjà le premier challenge qu'on a
don't
maintenant.
wish
Comment
to
est-ce qu'on
be
peut les identifier pour
identified.
pour pouvoir
That's
aussi
one of the
à
first
travers
challenges.
comment on dit, les modalités qu'on a pour pouvoir aussi délivrer cette aide financière. Des fois, c'est un gros problème, mais heureusement, on a aussi des méthodes qu'on a mises
this is
sur
a big
place. On a
issue
aussi des
to
techniques
have an
qu'on a
ID card, but there are
développées,
other
cela aidé
methods
par
and
l'expérience
techniques that
de
we
ces
have been
dernières années.
developing.
Donc, à part le fait que les gouvernements
Of
aussi nous
course,
accompagnent
based on
dans
the
ça,
experience in
parce
the
qu'ils
last few
comprennent
years.
aussi que les personnes
And
en
the
mobilité, des
governments
fois aussi n'ont pas de
accompany
documents, donc ils
and
nous
help
permettent aussi
out
des fois de faire des
for
identités
those
temporaires
people
qui
that
peuvent être
are in
utilisées
transit.
pour pouvoir délivrer cette
They provide
assistance.
them with a
Des fois aussi,
temporary
il y a le
identity
fait
that
que
can be
ici,
used
bon,
for
avant
these
même de
people
développer
to
des
be
programmes
able to
cash pour des
obtain
migrants, il y
a
a une
credit card
analyse
or
qui se
cash.
fait
We have
du
developed
contexte,
cash
l'existence des marchés,
programs,
pour voir un peu quelle est la
keeping in
méthodologie la
mind
plus
the
adaptée
existence
pour pouvoir aussi
of the
délivrer
markets
cette
through the
assistance.
different
Donc, je pense que
routes,
là,
thinking
les professionnels du cash sont,
of the
je veux dire,
formulae,
les professionnels du cash sont
and of course,
vraiment habitués à ces types de situations
understanding
et des
which
situations et
are the
des solutions
circumstances.
sont trouvées,
And
sont
in our
cherchées
country,
et cela dépend
these
aussi des
aides
contextes.
understand the circumstances, so they've searched for the best solutions. Well, thank you. Thank you. Insa. Makan, go ahead. I do agree with what Insa has just said. The experience in Mali is quite similar. The phone operators also help out and intervene through these SIM cards. And this is quite interesting. So as to be able to provide these cards. And these are for those migrants that do not have an ID. Through our agency, cash is being taken into account as terrorism financing in certain countries. So yes, we're talking about the countries of the Sahel region. In those regions, it's very difficult. We have to take into account all the conflicts that take place, and we have to keep this in mind. one further question. There are many questions, by the way, very interesting. Let's go on to Lucia's question. Somebody else said that they're interested in hearing the answer. She talks about what the protection colleagues usually ask. It has to do with mitigating the risk of attracting the attention from smugglers when distributing CVA, and even increasing the prices recipients pay to cross. Any concrete examples from Africa, particularly? That is the question. And on the other hand, as I said, increasing the prices that the recipients need to pay. And are there examples in Africa? I don't know if INSA or Makan, do you have anything to say about mitigating these risks? I see that INSA has raised his hand. Might you answer this question, INSA? Yes, it is about this last question. Let me try to clarify the following. As a matter of fact, cash can be risky in certain regions and for the recipients. So yes, of course, we've faced recent experiences in Niger. The Red Cross has organized cash transfers. And yes, of course, they've faced issues with smugglers in that region. But this has allowed us to understand that the important thing is to be aware of the risks. When I spoke about studying the context, it's important to understand it, but also regarding all the risks that might exist. And for these risks that they experience. And marginalized individuals, there are certain aspects that need to be known in a clearer manner. So in these programs, we always try to limit the risks and never try to expose our recipients. There are many risks, but we have to find the right solutions which will allow us or allow these recipients to receive this assistance. Follow-up has taken place. We have negotiated agreements with certain retailers. The recipients need to exchange a voucher with what they need, for example. But of course, there are always risks. It's very difficult to control certain operations. But generally speaking, we need to understand the context in depth before deciding which is the best system so as to limit the risks. I believe that the Q&A is over. The good thing is that we are now going on to our breakout sessions. Let me explain what will take place now. We are going to break out, and there will be 4 groups with a maximum amount of 15 people. One in English, I will be the moderator, and there will be another breakout room in French and 2 in Spanish with Diego and Alvaro. We're going to have 30 minutes during the breakout sessions, and we will be able to answer questions. One of these questions has to do with ID and people in movement. We know, and we've spoken about this topic, we shall be delving on this to understand based on your different experiences. Thereafter, we're going to talk about assessment, learning, and accountability. MEAL by its acronym in English. This is something that was addressed on the chat, and it was mentioned during the presentations, and thereafter the risks, which was one of the last questions. I mean, there are definitely more risks for people in transit and risk for our teams and risks if we work with partners. And so we're going to use the whiteboard function. You know about NeuroBoard and the Jumble. Well, it's quite easy. We're going to explain how to work with this. Now, the IECA colleagues will put you in your breakout room. Please accept it. You're going to see this on the screen and follow the instructions. We're going to be working for 30 minutes.
We had a good 30 minutes to work in groups. So we have little time now for the training session. So I will now give the floor to Alvaro first. And then he will present a summary, maximum 2 minutes of some of the good practices, some of the topics. Alvaro, thank you. And thank you to all the participants who put their own grain of salt, a grain of sand. Well, in terms of the identification of people on the move, it's like in the workshop that we had gender concerns and issues, and the topic of, and the cash and vouchers were taken by men. So here the challenge was how to implement a program with a gender inside. There are some migrant people who do not want to be identified, and this poses a great challenge. Now, going to the accountability, monitoring, and learning curves, there was an interesting idea here, how to retool the method through artificial intelligence to get the follow-up we need, the follow-up of the cash transfer programs and monetary assistance programs. Now, in the route, well, along the way, we had many collaborations using cash in US currency, US dollars, also my notes. So I also remember timings in case of quick migration to identify the person for the monitoring and the evaluation, or express migration, if you wish. So I don't want to take too much time in order to close the session right on time. Very well. Thank you. Camille, I see you. I shall try to be quite succinct. It's a very interesting, we had some very interesting debates with African French-speaking colleagues. First, we dealt into identification, good practices, methods, the unique identification card, one single document with the identity, the roots, the needs of the people. Also, some challenges in this regard, the infiltration of people carrying weapons, armed people, that is difficult to identify sometimes. A great topic, the protection of personal data, that is important. And many other difficulties in the context of the identification of the persons and to have a good focus on the programs. Now, in regard to accountability and learning curves, we have highlighted a great practice to incorporate a number in the beneficiaries card so that people may have access and get to know this important channel. We need to promote this channel, accountability, and we have identified more challenges, very pessimistic takes in regard to the accountability issues. What we have agreed that not much is being done because there's not great accountability around. And we talked about the specific case of the surveys. After the delivery of the assistance, this becomes complicated with people on the move by definition. And there are many challenges to meet and many issues to solve and how to retool our timings and our methods. One more thing, because we are wrapping up, and I end up with the challenges well in line with the examples we posed. We described talking about the coyotes, the multiple uses of cash, the use of cash for other things like funding terrorism. So that is it. Diego, last word before we wrap up. Thank you, Holly. Real quick first item related to the identification of profiles, a good practice in building identification criteria amongst the organizations. And there's a very interesting challenge. We were not inclusive because of the lack of accessibility, people with handicap and people with certain illnesses. In regard to the monitoring methods, there are good practices, but there is one I'd like to highlight regarding the implementation of PA's mechanisms of the prevention of sexual abuse and PQR for populations in transit, and there's a notorious risk. In long-term programs, we have tried to cover larger time spans because we cannot carry out one monitoring procedure that is very efficient. Now, in terms of risks, a great experience that has to do with the manuals for the handling of the cash we deliver. So we need to have a good practice, and one of the risks related to the delivery of cash is to always bear in mind that there can be a malfunction of the available markets in the route of the migrants. There's more, but I'll stop here.
Thank you
Thank you for your interventions. We'll stop here, and I give the floor to Alvaro.
Well, thank you, Alvaro. In conclusion, let me try and do this as quickly as possible. We've reached our time limit. Let me underscore the urgent need regarding or achieving or reaching these monetary programs for people in transit. These are difficult access, and let's take note and to learn to increase flexibility when we implement these cash and voucher assistance programs. To be able to be more effective, as already mentioned by many of the speakers concerning these programs, we should not forget that there are 103 million people, we're talking of a large number of people, refugees. This is a record number since they've been recorded, but we should not forget about the challenge concerning the displaced people as well. And also to talk about the challenges that still remain regarding these cash and voucher assistance programs. They need to be resolved, and hopefully in the near future regarding human mobility and other cross-cutting spheres that might incidence in these cash and voucher assistance programs, to do something about it. First of all, well, let me thank all the speakers and agencies that have participated, especially ACID, the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation and Development. And thank you, CALP, for having organized this and for having allowed us to carry out this event. Thank you all.